Missing worship was considered a sin and was dealt with severely. The penalty for missing a worship service was the loss of food rations for an entire day. A second absence resulted in public whipping. And the penalty for 3 missed services was to be placed in the stocks daily in the public square for 6 months. Historians tell us that research has not shown that anyone in Jamestown Colony ever missed 3 times. Well, I imagine not. But you know, we could improve our attendance radically if we just did something like that. Obviously, we would never do that, even if we could. But missing worship is a serious business. Attendance in worship is a witness to our faith in Christ. Attendance in worship encourages others. Nothing is more discouraging to a first-time visitor than a half-empty church sanctuary. But just as importantly, God is waiting in this place to bless, heal, and strengthen us. This woman would have missed the healing touch of Jesus if she had not been in worship that day. The psalmist understands such devotion. For instance, the 23rd Psalm in verse 6. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of Yahweh forever. And in Psalm 122, verse 1, I was glad when they said to me, let us go into the house of Yahweh. And the psalmist also writes, for a day in your courts is better than 1,000 elsewhere. I'd rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than to dwell in the tents of wickedness. That's Psalm 84, verse 10. This sorely afflicted woman was in the synagogue on that Sabbath. And because she was there, Jesus healed her. From Luke's description, we have to wonder whether the disease that crippled this woman could have been psychological in origin. Notice how Luke describes her condition. On a Sabbath, Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues, and a woman was there who had been crippled by a spirit for 18 years. What does that mean? Crippled by a spirit. In pre-scientific times, of course, people attributed all disease to the presence of demons. This may have been the simple explanation for this wording. Demon possession is certainly recognized in the scriptures. Or in modern terms, maybe Luke is saying to us that this woman's problem was caused by something that was troubling her mentally or spiritually. One of the Psalms attributed to King David is very interesting. David writes, I am bowed down and brought very low. All day long I go about mourning. My back is filled with searing pain. There is no health in my body. I am feeble and utterly crushed. I groan in anguish of heart. From Psalm 38. If you read the rest of that psalm, it is clear that David attributes at least part of the fact that he is bowed down to his own guilt. He writes, because of your wrath, there is no health in my body. There is no soundness in my bones because of my sin. My guilt has overwhelmed me like a burden too heavy to bear. And of course, David had a lot to be guilty about. I would not be surprised if someone here this morning has spent time in bed because of back pain. I know that I have. In fact, one time I was here at the old St. Joe's Hospital for 6 days in traction because of back pain. And the cause of the aching back, the doctor said, stress. And what did the doctor doctor give for the aching back? Muscle relaxers and traction. To have a healthy back is sometimes to have a healthy mind. Psychological problems can cause us to feel bowed down. We see someone who is deeply troubled, and sometimes we say, that person seems to be carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. And before long, we even start to see it in his posture. Not as badly as this woman, of course, but we see shoulders slump and the back bend. Low self-esteem can cause a person to shrink into themselves. We tell our children, throw back your shoulders and stand proud. But some children seem incapable of doing that. And so a kind of lifelong deformity of slumping shoulders, and even more tragically, a slumping spirit begins forming. All kinds of things in life can cause souls as well as backs to be bent or bowed down. Humiliation and shame, lack of education, loss of a loved one through divorce or death, accident, disease, a problem with our personality or appearance. We don't know if any of these applied to this poor woman. All we know is that she was bent over and could not straighten up. When Jesus saw her, he called her forward. Now, even in that, the women, were separate from the men in the synagogue. There was a curtain in the back, and they were supposed to be quiet and stay behind the curtain. Jesus calls her forward, and he says, "Woman, you are set free from your infirmity." And then Jesus laid his hands upon her. And immediately she straightened up and she began praising God. It's a powerful thought. Jesus healing those who are bowed down, whatever the reason for their condition. Another psalm speaks to this. The Lord opens the eyes of the blind. The Lord raises those that are bowed down. That's Psalm 146. This woman, whatever the origin of her spirit of infirmity, was in worship on the Sabbath. And when Jesus told her to take that giant step forward, she obeyed. And this terrible burden was lifted from her body and her soul. Dr. Luke says, immediately she straightened up and began praising God. Jesus can do that for us. Whatever burden is weighing us down, we are instructed to give it to Jesus. Whether secret sin, or a sense of inferiority, or smothering anxiety, or lingering illness, give it to Jesus, whatever it may be. You do not have to carry it alone. Jesus will heal and make whole. Unfortunately, this wonderful story of the healing of the woman does not stop here. There is another character in Luke's story, a man with a different kind of spirit, a spirit of legalism and condemnation. Immediately after telling us that this woman straightened up and praised God, Luke tells us about this second character. Listen to these words. Indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath. By the way, that word indignant, incredibly colorful word. It means to snort like a horse. Indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath. The synagogue leader said to the people, "There are 6 days for work, so come and be healed on those days, not on the Sabbath." Where do people like this come from? They throw cold water on every good event. And for some reason, they seem to be drawn to churches and synagogues.